So I continue with Medium Panzer Company HDV 470. These are the tactical regulations of the German tank force applying to the Medium Panzer Company of May 1941 before Operation Barbarossa. They remained in effect until the end of the war, and they reflect the extensive combat experience accumulated since the beginning of the war and also pre-war trial and error. This video will focus on panzer tactics that were codified in the regulations. The Medium Panzer Company regulations apply not only to the medium panzers, which were the Panzer III, Panzer IV, and the Panzer V Panther, and also occasionally the Panzer XXXVIII in 1941 and 1942. But they also apply to the Heavy Panzer Company. Guderian, inspector of the panzer troops, he maintained a policy that even the Heavy Panzer Company had to follow the rules of the Medium Panzer Company. This included the Tiger and also the King Tiger Tank. The first regulation is that the Medium Panzer performs the combat mission as a whole platoon. Even if only one Tiger Tank or one Panzer IV is left, it still acts as one platoon. The Tigers or Panzer V Panthers fight in pairs, the platoon leader and the half-platoon leader. So the minimum acceptable use of armor is 2 armored combat vehicles, because 2 panzers can mutually support each other and employ an array of combat tactics that an entire tank platoon could employ. So 2 panzers in action was the minimum that they used in any operation. Coaxial and bow MGs must be used in close action. That means that they wanted the MGs to be used in under 400 meters for the coaxial MG and under 200 meters for the bow MG. Beyond that range, it's a waste of ammunition against single targets. But against mass targets, they have different rules. Against mass targets, which are columns, reserves on march, moving guns, they can open fire with these coaxial and bow MGs at up to 800 meters. Because these are big targets, masses of objects. The next regulation is that the panzer commander must try to strike at a great distance, while the firing position cannot be immediately recognized by the enemy. So they wanted the panzers to strike from a surprise flank ambush, just like the Red Army. The Red Army also liked the surprise flank ambush. But unlike the Red Army, which liked to charge in the close combat range, the panzers like to engage at the farthest reasonable distance. And for the Panther and Tiger Tank, the preferred distance was between 2,000 meters and 1,500 meters. For the Panzer IV long barrel in the second half of the World War II, it was 1,000 meters. And in the early stages of the war, the Panzer III and Panzer IV with the weaker cannons, they tried to engage the T-34s at less than 400 meters. Only after targets are neutralized can the panzers move. In general, bounds of 200 to 300 meters are made. So this is related to the way the German panzers move. They leapfrog from position to position, and they carefully observe the environment to make sure that after they advance to a position, that further advances will be safe. There's no enemies waiting to knock them out. So they leapfrog from position to position. This is dramatically different from the Red Army methods for both armored infantry. They don't concern themselves too much with losses. They're more concerned with maintaining the momentum of the offensive operation. 1944 Soviet tank assault tactics of the Medium Tank Company of the Soviet Red Army has a very different tactical policy in their regulations. The Soviets intend to fire while moving, racing at the enemy at maximum speed despite being under fire. At most, they are to stop for 5 to 8 seconds for aim fire. So you can see how the Soviets had massive tank losses, but they also gained massive results if these tactics worked, which they eventually did. But often they had a bloody nose. Soviet tank losses were several times that of the German in World War II. But the Soviets were the ones to win the war. despite having massive tank losses. The Soviet T-34 was far superior to the Tiger tank and the Panzer III and Panzer IV in both speed and mobility, but inferior in internal ammunition supply and also the gunnery skills of their crews. They also used inferior optics. Their cannons were just less accurate than the German cannons. The Soviet tank commander had to perform also as a gunner, which in the German panzers was a two-man job. So the Soviet Red Army tank commander was heavily overburdened in combat operations, which was a tactical disadvantage, mainly in tank-to-tank combat, which was the weak point of the Soviet Red Army. Only platoon commanders and above had two-way radios, making the regular T-34s less capable of tactical coordination. All of these tactical issues and the slower rate of fire of Soviet armor put them at a steep disadvantage in tank-to-tank combat. To compensate for their huge tank losses in World War II, the Soviets created an extremely capable tank recovery and repair system. Among these formations were mobile tank repair units that very quickly recovered knocked out T-34s from the battlefield and repaired them, sometimes as fast as 24 hours. The Germans often remarked that T-34s and other Soviet tanks would disappear overnight and reappear a short time later fully repaired and operational with a new crew, or sometimes even with the same crew. The regulations continues. The Panzer platoon commander gives the order for the formation the tank platoon takes in different situations. They must obey orders for the formation during march and assembly, but during combat, they have the freedom to choose what formation to use. The Germans used a variety of formations at the platoon level, and they were pretty much the same formations at the company, battalion, and even divisional level, and even corps level. Their favorite formation was the Panzer wedge, and the inverted wedge was an upside down V, and the Panzer wedge, which was a V. It was just an arrowhead. Assembly formation, which includes line or column. The panzers are placed 5 meters distant from each other. Marching formation, which is column or double column. These panzers move at 20 kilometers per hour while marching. Combat formation. Open column, double column, wedge, or open line. Open line is just a line of panzers. They placed the panzers not 5 meters distant from each other, but 50 in all of the combat formations, because they didn't want the panzers to bunch up and present themselves to be easy targets, to be knocked out one by one. So all the panzers are far apart from each other, and they imply the same tactics with infantry assault. If infantry is advancing across an open field, they can't advance in bunches. They have to advance spread far apart from each other. The Panzer platoon commander gives the order full cover. The entire tank platoon takes cover from an air attack or a ground assault. In combat, the Panzer platoon commander directs fire of all tanks by radio to concentrate firepower. So the tank commander can designate a certain number of panzers to strike one target and a certain number of panzers to strike another target. Or all the panzers could be opening fire at one target. Firing positions are chosen at long range and higher ground. Panzers dislike close combat, unlike the Soviets. They want to make it difficult for enemy armor and anti-tank artillery to fight back. In essence, the panzers want an unfair fight, the surprise flank counterattack, just like the Red Army. Originally, the Panzer III and Panzer IVs were support tanks in 1941, which overwatched light tank platoons equipped with a Panzer II in the attack. So originally, there were also Panzer IIs in frontline combat units in 1941, and eventually, by 1942, they were pulled out of action because these small tanks were better used as training vehicles. The Panzer platoon has a constant shift between fire movement to new firing positions. It's always split into two parts. One half platoon, which is 2 or 3 panzers, overwatches the other half platoon, which is also 2 or 3 panzers, as it advances. In the case of an understrength unit, it would just be 1 panzer per half platoon. In close meeting engagements, the panzers fire independently, even in motion. If a panzer platoon is ambushed by fire, they throw off smoke, retreat, and reposition. Living targets, which is enemy personnel, and non-armor piercing weapons, which is support weapons like mortars, are engaged with MG and explosive shells, and during close combat may be run over by the tank. So in both the Red Army and the German Army, they run over people and enemy equipment with tanks. That's why they want ruthless drivers, and that's actually part of the psychology of a German panzer driver, and it's codified in their regulations. Mass targets are immediately fired upon with the highest rate of fire. These mass targets could be reserves, disengaging elements, or approaching columns. Enemy infantry holding their positions are to be run over. Enemy infantry in foxholes and trenches. When attacking buildings and bunkers, the infantry is in the front, and the panzers support the infantry and the engineers with direct fire from the rear with high explosive and armor-piercing shells. The next segment of the regulation is on combat reconnaissance. In the German Panzer Division in 1941 and 1942, most of them, not all of them, had 2 reconnaissance battalions. One was an armored reconnaissance battalion, and one was a motorcycle battalion. They were flexible units that were actually used for a lot more purposes than just pure reconnaissance. They were also used as flank guards. The Panzer Division was advancing, its flanks would be patrolled by motorcycle battalion elements and armored recon elements. They were also used in the defense to hold overextended fronts. The armored reconnaissance battalion could perform mobile defense because they had armored half-tracks, armored cars, and companies of motorcycle infantry. Panzer combat reconnaissance gets their information on enemy wings and flanks, the direction of their movement, his strength, and to protect the main force from surprises during preliminary deployment and full deployment. They also detect enemy defensive weapons as well and secure obstacles and barriers ahead of main force. In the German Heavy Panzer Battalion, they had only 1 reconnaissance platoon, and they had a system of motorcycle messengers spread out throughout all the units and subunits of the Heavy Panzer Battalion. In the case of a Heavy Panzer Battalion, reconnaissance is done officially by its reconnaissance platoon equipped with armored half-tracks, or the Engineer Platoon or Panzer Pioneer Platoon also equipped with armored half-tracks. But very often, the Tiger tanks had to perform combat reconnaissance themselves. In a way, the Tiger tanks can perform very good combat reconnaissance because they're so heavily armored. The negative side is if they lost a Tiger in reconnaissance actions, it was a big waste of effort because a Tiger was a high-value asset compared to a bunch of motorcycle infantry or a single half-track. If the enemy resistance is too strong, the recon element falls back. Combat reconnaissance occurs under the cover of a main force if possible. The reconnaissance element removes obstacles and barriers if possible. After a successful breakthrough, the recon element withdraws behind the main body. In the Heavy Panzer Battalion, they have multiple assets to support the Tiger tanks. They have a command company, which was composed of a diverse series of specialized assets, including a reconnaissance platoon, engineer platoon, and a flak platoon. These units could conduct security on both day and night to protect the Tiger tanks. They could cover all the approach routes and observation routes around the valuable Tiger tanks and prevent them from destruction. The next series of regulations cover company formations, which is an extension of the platoon formations. So they sound pretty similar. Assembly includes line, company column, double column. March formations include column, double column. Combat formations include open column, double column, open line. Combat formations include open column, double column, open line, wedge, inverted wedge. The line formation, which is just the panzers lined up horizontally in a row, 50 meters away from each other, holds a frontage of 600 to 1,000 meters, which is the widest possible attack for a medium panzer company. The Panzer Wedge of the Medium Panzer Company is a more narrow but deeper attack. It's composed of two waves, the inner wave and the outer wave, the first wave and the second wave. This unit is between 200 to 250 meters wide, 600 meters deep. The next combat formation is the inverted wedge, which is a wider attack. It's 400 to 500 meters wide and 400 to 500 meters deep. The company commander is positioned in the front or close to the front of the formation. The next series of regulations cover the Panzer Company assault tactics. The preliminary deployment is given by the Panzer commander if the unit runs into the enemy. The Panzer Company is best employed in full company strength with good clarity of terrain. It has elevated firing positions and an attack width that doesn't exceed 1,200 meters. The inverted wedge is considered the best attack. Any attack order by Panzer commanders must include the following information: enemy news, the situation with own units, the situation with neighboring units, the intention of the Panzer Battalion, the objective, the composition of the battalion and company, and the mission for all the companies and platoons of the battalion, the coordination with other weapons and reference points during the advance. The Medium Panzer Company attacks with fire and movement cycles. They leapfrog from position to position and destroy the enemy. The company commander, positioned at the front, coordinates the panzer assault in two waves. The first wave knocks out enemy anti-tank artillery and AT weapons. They also focus on eliminating heavy support weapons like mortars and artillery pieces. After they knock out the higher value assets, they engage the resistance nests. The first wave of the panzer assault focuses on eliminating enemy anti-tank weapons, including enemy armor and also enemy anti-tank artillery. They also focus on knocking out the enemy support weapons like MGs and mortars, and also field artillery. After these higher value assets are eliminated, then they engage the infantry in resistance nests. While this is going on, the second wave comes in and they focus on knocking out the enemy in resistance nests. The Medium Panzer Company employs tactics of fire, maneuver, and overwatch, while the reconnaissance platoon or any available reconnaissance assets establishes the assembly area. Panzers, both medium and heavy, prefer to attack at dawn with preparations for the attack routes and reconnaissance done the day before. In house-to-house combat, panzers will fight with infantry, and only half platoons, which is 2 or 3 panzers, will be allocated to each infantry assault detachment. It is forbidden that any more than 2 panzers be deployed in this manner, and the remaining panzers of the company must stay behind with the armored group. The Germans are trying to preserve their panzers. They really don't like sending panzers into house-to-house fighting and urban warfare. But the reality is that armor had to fight in urban warfare all the time in World War II, and the Germans learned that to their detriment in the battle for Stalingrad. The German urban warfare tactics are similar to the Soviet or American, but was generally much worse equipped. The regulations also state that the infantry must lead, tanks must follow and overwatch from safe distances in urban warfare. After a successful breakthrough, the armor storms forward into the depths ahead of the infantry. In tank-to-tank combat, the entire Medium Panzer Company, if possible, fires from concealed positions and elevated positions from unexpected directions. They must fire first. If the enemy retreats, the Medium Panzer Company pursues and destroys them. So that's it for the Medium Panzer Company. Thanks so much for watching. Please help out this channel by liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell. Please check out my Substack and my playlists. Comment below on what you think about the Medium Panzer Company's tactics.